Hi, I'm Steph Strickland with GeekWire Studios, and I am your host for Does Compute, the podcast where we delve into the latest in computer science with the help from experts at Carnegie Mellon University School of Computer Science. I want to introduce you to my guest today. This is Jessica Hammer. Jessica is known for her work in game design, learning sciences, and human computer interaction, HCI. She is with the Center for Transformational Play, which is part of the Human Computer Interaction Institute at the Carnegie Mellon University School of Computer Science. Hi, how are you?
Hi, great. How are you? Nice to meet you, Steph.
Very nice to meet you as well. And I am very excited to talk to you about so many things. This is both a very fun topic, but one that has all of these wonderfully important cohorts that go along with it. So we're going to talk about transformational play, but I think to sort of set the stage for that, can we come up with a foundational understanding of what exactly that means?
Yeah, absolutely. So, transformational play is play that changes the way that people think, feel, or behave. And that can mean lots of different things depending on what kind of play or what kind of audience you're talking about. So, you might think of it, for example, as opportunities for play in formal learning settings. You can imagine kids learning math through games where they're practicing their math skills. But the reason why I think of this as transformational play is because for me, it goes beyond the kinds of formal settings for change and into the way that play can really interpenetrate and transform our daily lives. So, for example, one thing I often think of when I think of transformational play is the fact that 20% of adults have no close friends. And for people who are lonely, the opportunity to play with others becomes a way of building relationships where you have the alibi of the shared activity. That's also an example of transformational play. So I see transformational play as a big tent for all the ways that play can shape and change us in the many different contexts in which we live.
This is interesting because you just mentioned adults. And I think when you ask a lot of people what it means to play and to be involved in games, we tend to think of this as a youth activity. Do you see this as sort of equally split? You've certainly mentioned both, but the way you focused on adults was interesting to me.
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, in play studies and the history of play, there's actually the idea of what is play and who is play for has been really contested. There's a wonderful book called The Ambiguity of Play by a guy named Sutton Smith. And what he does is he actually looks at seven different roles that play has had anthropologically in different cultures across human history. And I think that in America, we are in a society that often thinks of play as being primarily for children, that play is unserious or not for adults. But if we look cross culturally or we look historically, we can actually see that adult play has actually often been seen as something that's critical to, for example, uh, the success of a culture, the success of a society. If you think about, for example, the role the Olympics played in ancient Greece, right? Or for that matter, today. So, to me, I'm especially interested in adult play, not so much because I think it's the most important place in the lifespan where people play, but because I think adults are the most underserved with play. We expect people to get serious as they grow up, and maybe we stop taking as much time and attention to think about their joy and their pleasure. So, I feel like part of my job is to be an advocate for play across the lifespan from as a colleague of mine, John Balish calls it K to gray, right? And uh, there's no age that's too old to play, or for that matter, to transform yourself.
Jessica, I'm in a networking event and a behavioral scientist runs it. His name is John Levy, and he actually has us play games. And it takes all of 2 minutes, but his contention to back up what you're saying is that in those 2 minutes of playing these ostensibly silly games, we become bonded to strangers. So this is a topic, from play to gray, as your colleague, has mentioned, certainly resonates with me as someone who is playing games with strangers at these
Yep.
networking events. It does work. How does computer science fit into this?
It's a great question. Uh, Humans play with whatever materials they have available. So, for example, one of the projects I did before I came to CMU was designing play and game clubs for girls in rural Ethiopia, where we were working with found materials, right? We could not assume that these girls had any money to buy games or to buy even like dice, right? So, how could we create games and play from materials in the environment? And you see this all the time with kids, right? You give them a present, they want to play with the box. So, the play is an impulse that we have to manipulate the objects that are in our world. And right now, a lot of our time is spent interacting with digital systems of one kind or another. So, I'm really interested in how these new technologies can augment our experience of play and augment our transformation. And that could look like integrating new technologies into the design of games, right? Into the games themselves, into the game design process, right? So, one of the things that the CTP does is we build novel tools and systems for game designers to make better games. But it could also mean thinking about new methods to instrument or collect data from games, right? Lots of places where technology can fit into this process. But at the end of the day, the piece of technology that I'm most interested in is the one that's in here, right? How does the way we interact with our phone, with a VR headset, with an AI system, change the way that we experience playfulness, and then change the way that we move forward in the world?
You touched on using computer science and this relatively, in the big scheme of things, new move for augmented reality. So I want to talk now about AR, VR, and XR, a space that both seemingly informs your research as well as changes the back end user experience, as you've talked about. What advancements are you seeing as it pertains to the work you're doing?
Uh, One of the most exciting projects that we worked on, published a couple of years ago, is a system called V-Light that brings augmented reality together with edge computing. The idea is that there's lots of cool stuff that we can do on our phones, right? But our phones are small devices with limited battery life and limited power. What edge computing does is it allows you to offload intensive computational processes to network nodes that are near you, right at the edge of the network, meaning there's low latency for you to offload and then get this data back. So, one of the things that we did in this project, in collaboration with a company called Interdigital, is we actually built a system that allows game designers to create augmented reality games where they're offloading processing power to the cloud. And we built a game that was a test case. We were able to do live pose detection, right, on your phone very, very quickly because we were offloading it to a nearby edge node for computation. That in turn allowed us to, for example, do a live multiplayer augmented reality full body first like shooting game, right? You're trying to knock off all of your opponent's armor, and when you do, then you win the game. So in this case, the novel technology is pushing what we can do with game design, and more than that, it's allowing game designers to prototype what kinds of games we might create for future devices that don't even exist yet, right? In 10 years, our phones are going to have new kinds of processing power, new kinds of abilities built in. But with the systems that we built, game designers can actually say, well, let me pretend that the phone has this much extra power. What could I make? And let me prototype and play test it now to help me see what's going to be possible a decade down the road with hardware that hasn't even been dreamed of.
Echo of the Abyss is something I actually looked at on your website, but I was really interested in the collaboration since we've talked about that with Play Included and Project Baseplate. Give me ground zero. Explain to our audience what this is. It's very, very cool.
Project Baseplate is a K-12 learning network that lets us deploy validated and vetted playful learning interventions into schools, after school programs, community organizations, and other kinds of groups. So, our first intervention is Again, with the collaboration of play included, the brick by brick program, kids get together in brick clubs and they do collaborative Lego building, totally analog, as a way of improving their social emotional learning skills. The brick by brick program was originally developed specifically to support neurodivergent kids, and there's research evidence backing this up. But we agreed to partner with Play Included because we actually believe, first of all, that all kids would benefit from improving their social emotional learning skills. And neurodivergent kids are not the only ones who don't have access to the practice that they need. But number two, once you have a pipeline for kids to play together in a way that gets them socially engaged and makes them feel a sense of belonging, right? Like, oh, I'm doing this thing, I'm of value to this club and to my team. Then you can use that to start to deliver other kinds of learning or social interventions.
It's interesting you take something that is a classic. I have a set of Legos that is, more than 30 years old. And when I deposit them on the table, it doesn't matter how old you are, your inclination to grab and start to build, much like the box. You mentioned the box as a gift because you're only limited by your imagination in that sense. I'll be very interested to see where this particular project goes.
Well, one of the things that we're actually looking at is what might it look like to augment Lego play with different kinds of technology. So, one of the very first projects I ever worked on as a game designer was digital Lego games back in, I don't know, 2003. Again, we now have new technologies that allow us to try new things. So it's not just about snapping bricks together on your computer, right? We have a project with the Entertainment Technology Center where I have a joint appointment where we are actually looking at how might you use augmented reality to supplement real world collaborative Lego play. And right now we're just trying to create a tech demo. What can be done? How well can we recognize bricks? But you can see that once you have the basic technology, you could do all kinds of really cool things, right? So, for example, imagine that you're trying to build a model, point your phone at the model, and it says, we think you made a mistake 3 steps ago, right? Instead of you getting frustrated and not being able to figure out what it is you did wrong. I say this having watched my daughter and my partner take apart a very large portion of the Lego Deku Tree set, right, to figure out where they went wrong like 10 steps ago. Or you might be able to do things like design new forms of collaborative or shared Lego play, right? Right now, in the brick clubs, kids take one of three roles. They can supply bricks to the other two people on their team. They can do the brick building, or they can be the one holding the manual and saying, here's what we do, right? That's the form of the collaboration. But imagine now if you're playing, you've got your phone, it's sitting up watching you play, and your friend sends you a challenge, right? Remotely. You don't even necessarily have to be in the same room because, of course, we want kids to be able to play together even when they're not able to be together. So that's an example of how we think about how do we get the best out of analog play in ways that are informed by research, validate what's possible with research, and then think about how technology can extend, augment, and create new experiences.
I have this vision of creating something in using Lego bricks and then using the research you're doing to skin it with what I think I've made and deploying it in a virtual world. I mean, you can immediately see from talking to you the wide ranging implications of something that has such a classic, sort of history with those of us who used to play this as a kid before we went on to play other things. One of the things I want to ask you about is to give me a little more context around this notion of accessibility, please.
Absolutely. Uh, so we can think about accessibility in terms of physical accessibility, mental and cognitive accessibility, emotional accessibility, social accessibility. Like, is it permissible for me to do this? One of my favorite research studies is Dimitri Williams looked at uh, uh, men and women self-reporting how much they played an MMORPG, particular game, and then looked at the log data and found that men overreported and women underreported how much they played in order to fit into these social stereotypes. But uh, for me, one of the things that I'm really curious about is how do we make sure that as new technologies develop, that we're thinking about accessibility in parallel. And for that, one of the things that we look at is game streaming. So, game streaming, for those who may not watch, is where you have a streamer playing a game live, often talking about, narrating what it is they're doing. You have a live audience who's chatting and talking about the stream. The problem is that this this system, game streaming platforms, are very, very hard to access for anyone who is blind or low vision. The chat can often go very fast. There's no way to really. The streamer is in control of whether or not they turn on the accessibility settings for their game. They may not want to do that for a minority of their audience, right? Lots of barriers in place. My PhD student, Noor Hamad, um, built a system that allows game streamers who are playing Unity games to basically export their metadata such that you can then put custom overlays over the video and do things like me, a viewer, can turn on the accessibility settings just for me using that metadata, right? And other people don't see them. But they might, for example, use the same metadata to change the language for the game from English to Spanish so that they can follow along with the text and, for example, read the tooltips. We've built prototypes that actually accomplish these things. And more than that, Noor led a study with blind and low vision participants to understand how would this system make it possible for them to watch other people play and participate in live Twitch communities. This is one of the places where the technology is there. We've built these prototypes, they exist, we've run them in the field, obviously very messy. And we would love to see uptake of these systems by the platforms that control our ability to release things. So, Twitch, YouTube, this one's for you. If you want to make your games, people streaming games on your platform more accessible, you should give us a call.
I want to talk to you about not only the students you advise, but also what's going on from that interdisciplinary standpoint and the teams, as we've talked about. What advice would you offer to those interdisciplinary teams? Collaboration is very easy to say, it's much more challenging to actually execute upon. What advice would you give?
Absolutely. Rather than start with advice, I want to start with three things that our team does that I think makes us so productive, creative, and happy. And those are often not words that you hear in the same sentence. But one of the things that we do at the Center for Transformational Play is we actually apply the lessons of game design to the design of the environment in which we work and how we ourselves collaborate. So, one of the things that we do is we iterate quickly, right? And maybe this is not a surprise, right? Iterative design, iterative development. But one of the most important things in order to enable that is for people to celebrate and welcome failure, right? Mess. That is really hard to enculturate in a society where most of us have been trained out of that, right? You have to do it right. You have to do it neatly. So one of the things I do, for example, when I'm teaching students in a class, I got to do this really fast, train them in this idea of embrace the mess. We do an exercise I call 5 spoons. We give them 5 spoons. Each person is allowed to add one item out of their pockets, and they have to make a game in 20 minutes. They show their game, we talk about it, then I give them a new challenge, and they have to incorporate that challenge in 10 minutes. And then they have to incorporate the next challenge in 5 minutes, and then 2 minutes. And the point of this exercise is to force them to show the mess and to give me an opportunity to model what happens when you show the mess. So all of a sudden, people are going, oh, I showed a messy prototype and I didn't get yelled at. The whole class applauded for me. And that's really, really visceral. So you can start designing some of these techniques to not just say that you want people to iterate fast and to make messy drafts so that we can improve them together, but to make sure that people internalize that you have the systems to support it and they're not secretly going to be punished for it. That's thing one. And by the way, if you're in a position of power, this is easy to do. If you're not in a position of power, if you're doing this from below, my challenge to you is take a risk, offer someone in your life the chance to see something messy, and just notice how they respond. Because there are people in your life who likely would be willing to look at the mess with a cheer and a smile that you don't know about yet. So think about doing some experiments. Number two, we use some systems that actually my research group, and especially working with my former PhD student, Amy Cook, now a professor at University of Memphis, is how do you improve the feedback and iteration process to get higher quality feedback more quickly and do more effective things with it? So together with Amy and other stakeholders here at CMU, we actually went to the game industry and looked at what are the problems that working professionals face around getting good feedback? And the answer is lots, lots. Everything from they can't get feedback when they need it to the feedback that they get is low quality because it's not actionable or not relevant, right? Not scoped to the changes they could actually make. So we have created and use ourselves both digital and analog systems for improving the feedback process. So that's number two. If you're interested in this, you can go look up my Amy Cook's work on Peer Presents with me and other collaborators, Stephen Dow over at UCSD. And you can also look up something called same acronym as Echo of the Abyss, but it doesn't stand for that. EOTA, which stands for Experiences, Observations, Theories, and Advice. And that's a fully analog system you can implement in any meeting to get better feedback on a piece of media or an experience. So that's number two is use some of what's out there in terms of improving the quality of feedback you get, right? Iterating fast is not helpful unless you're actually getting good data about what to improve. And then number three is going to sound controversial, but it's backed by the research. We cap the amount that we work in a given week. So academia has a reputation for working people all the time. You come home after your day job and then you do more research. But there's a large body of data that shows that people get less productive and effective if they're working more than 45 hours a week. And that high value work, creative work, research, thinking work is the first thing to go, right? The first thing to start losing quality. So the thing that I often say is that I want my team doing the same high quality creative work, better high quality creative work. They'll be 20 years smarter 20 years from now. So how do we think about designing sustainable systems for excellence? That's not specific to an interdisciplinary team, but all three of these things are going to help you use artifacts to talk to interdisciplinary collaborators and have them understand what you mean. Improve the quality of feedback that you're getting from people who may not share your disciplinary assumptions, and make sure you're all actually in the best mental shape that you can be to do that work and to turn out something really amazing.
Jessica, this has been an enlightening discussion. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
You have been listening to Does Compute, the podcast where we examine computer science and how it's building useful stuff that works. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. I'm Steph Strickland with GeekWire Studios.